Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Oh, this is a good one.
Yeah, it's all about unlocking your potential, but not through some huge, massive, overnight change. It's more about those small but consistent changes.
Small but mighty. I like that.
Exactly. And it's packed with so many practical strategies. I mean, it really digs into the science behind habits.
And how to really make those habits work for you, not against you.
Totally. And what I found really fascinating was how James Clear himself got into all of this. I mean, he had this life-changing experience in high school.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
So he was playing baseball and had this really bad injury, multiple facial fractures, a bulging eyeball, the whole.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was super intense.
So how did that lead him to habits?
Well, his recovery was, pretty slow.
Understandably.
But through that process, he kind of discovered the power of these tiny actions you do every day. He really focused on making these 1% improvements, and eventually those tiny gains totally added up.
It's incredible, isn't it, how those small things can snowball into something so much bigger.
It really is. It's like that British cycling team, remember?
Oh, yeah. They were obsessed with marginal gains.
Exactly. They focused on making these tiny improvements in everything, right? Like bike design, athlete sleep, all these little things.
And they went from being just an average team to dominating the sport.
It's amazing. It's proof that those small changes can compound into these crazy results.
It's makes you rethink those little things you do every day, right?
Totally. Even making your bed or drinking an extra glass of water, those things could really add up over time.
For sure. It's all about consistency.
So one of the biggest takeaways from Atomic Habits is that we should kind of forget about those strict goals. Yeah, it's more about building systems. This was kind of mind-blowing for me at first. I was always a big goal setter.
So what shifted your thinking?
Well, Clear outlines these 4 key problems with goal setting.
Lay on me.
So first off, the changes from goals are often temporary. You hit the goal, then you stop doing the thing that got you there.
Makes sense. It's like a diet. You reach your goal weight and then you go back to your old habits.
Right. Second, goals make you miss the system, the process that helps you achieve those goals.
So it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey.
Exactly. Third, goals can actually restrict your happiness.
Really? Why is that?
Because you're so focused on the end result that you forget to enjoy the process, the journey.
I see what you mean. It's like being so focused on reaching the summit of a mountain that you forget to appreciate the view along the way.
That's a great analogy. And finally, goals can conflict with long-term progress. You're always chasing that next shiny object instead of focusing on consistent, reliable system.
So it's about shifting our focus from the outcome to the process.
Totally. And that's where Clear's framework for building better habits comes in, the 4 laws of behavior change.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are they?
So to make a habit stick, you got to make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
Oh, I like that. Simple and easy to remember.
Right. He breaks it down so well. And there's this crazy story in chapter 4. I think it perfectly shows why we need to be aware of our habits.
Okay, what happened?
It's about this retail clerk who's on autopilot, right?
Right.
And he ends up cutting a customer's credit card in half.
Wait, what? How did that happen?
He'd been cutting up gift cards all day, and without even thinking, he just kept going with the next card he picked up.
Oh, no. That's every customer's worst nightmare.
Right. But it shows how our habits can work unconsciously. We can't change what we don't even realize we're doing.
It's Clear says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Yeah. Powerful stuff.
So true. So once we know our habits, how do we change them?
Well, Clear introduces this idea of implementation intentions.
Implementation intentions, what's that?
It's about making a specific plan for your habit. Instead of just saying, I want to exercise more, you'd say,
I will go for a run every morning at 7:00, something like that.
Exactly. I will behavior at time and location. It takes the guesswork out of it.
It's like scheduling a date with yourself for that habit.
Exactly. And speaking of making things obvious, the next chapter dives into how much our environment shapes our habits.
Yeah, he talks about how motivation is overrated. Our surroundings actually play a bigger role than we think.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Right. He mentions this study where they rearranged drinks in a hospital cafeteria They made water more visible and, easier to grab. People started drinking more water and less soda, like without anyone telling them to.
Wow. So we can actually design our environment to support our good habits.
Exactly. It's like setting yourself up for success, not just relying on willpower.
So it's not just what's inside our heads, it's what's around us too.
Right. And this story in Chapter 7 is wild. It's about these U.S. soldiers in Vietnam who were, like, heavily using heroin.
Oh, wow.
But when they came home, they basically kicked their addiction.
Really? That's amazing.
And it wasn't because of some intense rehab program or anything. It was the change in environment. They weren't surrounded by those, like, cues and triggers anymore.
It's like their environment was enabling the addiction, and then boom, new environment, new habits.
It's crazy, right? It kind of challenges the whole willpower thing.
Big time. It's more about removing those temptations than constantly fighting them.
I love that, making it easier to do the right thing.
Totally. Like, imagine trying to eat healthy when you're surrounded by junk food. It's like setting yourself up for failure.
So true. So we've got making habits obvious and changing our environment. But how do we make those good habits, like, more appealing?
I like where this is going.
Right. Because let's be honest, some habits are just, like, more fun than others.
Well, Clear suggests something called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. That sounds kind of sneaky. Tell me more.
It's actually pretty genius. It's about linking something you want to do with something you need to do.
Okay, I'm listening.
So there's this guy, Ronan Byrne, who loves watching Netflix, right? But he also knows he should be exercising more.
A classic dilemma.
Right. So what does he do? He hacks his stationary bike so Netflix only plays when he's pedaling at a certain speed.
No way. That's brilliant.
Right. He makes his workout way more attractive by, like, bundling it with something he actually enjoys.
That's awesome. So we're tapping into that instant gratification.
Exactly. So it's obvious, it's attractive, it's easy.
And hopefully satisfying. Okay, so we can't forget about the people around us.
You mean like peer pressure and stuff?
Yeah, but Clear goes deeper than that. He explains how our social circles, like, really shape our habits.
So who are we influenced by?
He says there are 3 groups. The close ones, like our family and friends.
Yeah.
Then there's the many, our tribe or community. And then there's the powerful, the ones of status.
It's like we're constantly being influenced by all these different people.
It's true. So we have to, like, think about if our social circles are supporting those good habits or maybe pulling us in the wrong direction.
Good point. Sometimes you got to reevaluate who you're hanging out with. So what about breaking bad habits?
Well, Chapter 10 gets into that. Clear says we need to understand, like, why we have those bad habits in the first place.
Like, what's the root cause?
Exactly. What need or emotion are we trying to satisfy with that behavior? Like, if you're always on social media, are you seeking connection, distraction, or something else?
Makes sense. It's about understanding the why behind the behavior.
Once you know that,
Yeah.
you can start to find, like, healthier ways to meet that need.
So you're not just suppressing the habit, you're replacing it with something better.
And Clear even suggests we, like, reframe our thinking about habits instead of, I did this, I get to do this.
It's like flipping the script, turning it into a positive.
Exactly. It changes your whole perspective. Now, for all those people who love to plan and research but never actually, like, do the thing.
Oh, I know a few people like that.
Chapter 11 has a simple message. Just start.
Sometimes the hardest part is taking that first step.
So true. We get caught up in trying to find the perfect plan, and we never take action.
Analysis paralysis.
He tells this story about a photography professor who splits his class into 2 groups. One focused on quantity, the other on quality.
Interesting. Which group did better?
The quantity group, the ones who just took tons of pictures, ended up with the best work because they were, like, experimenting and learning as they went.
They were getting their reps in.
Exactly. So when it comes to habits, it's better to start small and improve than wait for the perfect plan.
It's like anything, right? You learn by doing.
Now, our brains love efficiency, right? So we naturally go for the easiest option.
The path of least resistance.
That's Chapter 12, the law of least effort. And it works for both good and bad habits.
So, like, if my phone's always right there, I'm more likely to pick it up and scroll mindlessly.
Totally. But if you make it harder to access, put it in a drawer or something, you're less tempted.
Makes sense. Out of sight, out of mind.
So we got to make those good habits as easy as possible. Clear calls it priming your environment.
Like setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, like laying out your workout clothes the night before or prepping healthy meals for the week.
Smart. Okay, so we're making it obvious, easy, designing our environment. But what about procrastination? We all struggle with that.
Oh, for sure. Well, Chapter 13 has this simple but powerful tool for that, the 2-minute rule.
Okay, I gotta hear this one. 2 minutes, huh?
So basically, when you're starting a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
So you're breaking it down into like super tiny steps?
Exactly. Like if you want to start running, don't focus on the whole 5K. Just focus on putting on your running shoes.
It's like tricking your brain into getting started.
And then once you've got that momentum, it's easier to keep going.
I like it. Simple but effective. So we've got all these great strategies, but how do we like really lock in those good habits, make sure we stick with them?
That's where Chapter 14 comes in, commitment devices.
Commitment devices.
It's basically like setting up consequences for yourself if you don't follow through.
Interesting. You're making it harder to back out.
Exactly. You're creating a contract with yourself, and often having someone else involved helps too.
Like an accountability buddy.
Right. Clear gives examples of how people have used these habit contracts to achieve all sorts of things.
Like what?
Like, this one entrepreneur wanted to lose weight, so he made a contract with his wife and trainer.
Okay. So what were the stakes?
If he missed a workout, he had to wear his rival football team's hat.
Ouch, talk about motivation.
Right. Makes those bad habits way less appealing. So we've talked about making those good habits, like, inevitable. But how do we make them more satisfying?
Because some habits are just more enjoyable than others.
Right. And that's Chapter 15. Clear explains this thing called the cardinal rule of behavior change.
Ooh, sounds important. What is it?
It's this. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
Makes sense. Our brains are wired for pleasure and pain.
But here's the thing. The rewards for good habits are often delayed. You exercise today, but you don't see the results for weeks. You save money now, but you don't reap the benefits until retirement.
That's true. It's tough to stay motivated when the payoff is so far down the road.
So how do we bridge that gap?
Clear says we gotta find ways to make those good habits feel successful right away.
Give me some examples.
Well, he talks about the power of like visual measurements, using habit trackers.
Like those calendars where you mark off each day you stick to your habit.
Exactly. There's something so satisfying about seeing those streaks.
It's like a visual reminder of your progress.
And Clear even shares his own story of using, get this, the paperclip strategy to stay on track with his sales calls.
The paperclip strategy.
He would start the day with like a jar of paper clips, and for every call he made, he'd move a clip to another jar.
Haha, that's kind of clever.
It's about making it fun and engaging.
And speaking of support, in Chapter 17, Clear introduces this idea of having an accountability partner.
Like someone to help keep you on track.
Exactly. Having someone to answer to makes it way harder to, like, slip up.
It's like built-in motivation and support.
Okay, so let's talk talent. Does it matter when it comes to habits?
Good question. I'm curious to hear what Clear has to say about that.
Well, in Chapter 18, he says our genes do influence our natural inclinations, but they don't, like, determine our destiny.
So it's not all about genetics.
Right. He brings up Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer.
Oh, yeah, the most decorated Olympian of all time.
Exactly. He obviously had physical advantages, right? But he still trained like crazy to reach his full potential.
So it's nature and nurture working together.
We can't just blame our genes and not put in the work.
It's all about effort and consistency.
So how do we stay motivated over the long haul?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Well, Chapter 19 talks about this thing called the Goldilocks rule.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What's the Goldilocks rule?
So it says we're most motivated when we're working on tasks that are like just manageable difficulty. Not too hard, not too easy.
Ah, so it's got to be challenging enough to keep us engaged, but not so challenging that we get discouraged.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot. Clear shares this inspiring story about Steve Martin, the comedian.
Yeah, he's a legend.
So Steve Martin spent years practicing stand-up comedy, even when it was hard and, like, kind of embarrassing.
He was putting in the work, honing his craft.
It was that consistency, that willingness to push himself that led to his huge success.
It's about embracing those early struggles and knowing that they're part of the process.
And in Chapter 20, Clear throws us a curveball. He talks about the downsides of good habits.
Hey, what? How can good habits be bad?
He says they can become a trap if we get complacent,
Ah, so we get stuck in a rut doing the same things over and over, even if they're not serving us anymore.
Exactly. He emphasizes the importance of reflection and review, making sure our habits are still helping us grow.
It's like checking in with yourself and asking, are these habits still working for me?
Totally. He shares examples of how, like, top performers, even Olympic athletes, use reflection in their training.
So they're constantly looking for ways to improve even when they're already at the top of their game.
It's all about continuous improvement, right? Never settling.
So it sounds like Atomic Habits is full of like practical wisdom and actionable advice.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a roadmap for personal growth, but in a way that's like super relatable and easy to understand.
Well, I can't wait to keep diving in and see what else we can learn from James Clear. Welcome back to the deep dive. It's amazing how Clear, weaves together science, storytelling, and actual advice. It's like a roadmap for growth, not boring.
Right. He makes this whole habit thing, actually interesting. So we left off talking about reflection. What's next?
Well, in chapter 21, there's this idea of the plateau of latent potential. It's like sometimes you put in a ton of effort and you don't see those results right away.
I hate when that happens. It's so discouraging.
But Clear says it doesn't mean you're not making progress.
So it's like what? Those bamboo trees. They take forever to sprout, but then boom, they shoot up crazy fast.
Exactly. It's all that underground growth that fuels that sudden burst. He also uses the ice cube analogy.
Oh yeah, it takes a certain amount of heat before it starts to melt, right?
And then once it hits that point, it melts super fast.
Okay, I'm getting the picture. So be patient even when you don't see those instant results. But how do we push past those plateaus?
Clear says focus on the process, not the product. He talks about writers wanting to publish a book. The book is the product, right? But the writing every day, that's the process.
So don't get fixated on the end goal. Just focus on the daily actions.
Exactly. And that way, you're more likely to actually finish the book or whatever your product is.
Makes sense. Take some of the pressure off, too. Now, chapter 22 is all about mastering the fundamentals. I'm curious about this one.
Well, Clear's point is that, real mastery comes from focusing on those basic skills and just getting really good at them.
It's don't skip the basics.
It's so shortcuts. It's like learning an instrument. You got to practice those scales and chords before you can play some crazy concerto.
I remember those days. Scales for hours.
He uses the example of a chef who makes the perfect omelet. Sounds simple, right?
I mean, everyone loves a good omelet.
But there's actually a lot of technique involved. And by mastering that basic skill, the chef can then create, way more complex dishes.
It's like building blocks. Okay, so master those fundamentals. What's next on the habit journey?
Chapter 23 is all about the aggregation of marginal gains. It's like those small improvements you make can add up big time.
We talked about that with the British cycling team, right? But how do we, actually apply that in our lives?
Clear says, look for those areas where you can make small tweaks and then just be consistent. Maybe it's getting a little more sleep, being more efficient at work, or practicing a new skill for a few minutes each day.
It's like finding those tiny 1% improvements.
And then those tiny improvements start to build on each other. Now, the next chapter, chapter 24, is about making decisions. Clear talks about a decision matrix.
A decision matrix? Sounds intense.
It's not that complicated. It's basically a tool to help you make those decisions, especially the everyday ones that, impact your habits.
Okay, so how does it work?
You create a set of criteria to, evaluate different options, and then you use those criteria to guide your choices.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you want to eat healthier. So your decision matrix might consider things like, is it nutritious? Does it taste good? Is it convenient? How much does it cost? Things like that.
That's actually really helpful. It's like a system for making better choices. So we're back to reflection and review again in chapter 25.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme, for sure. But it's important. Taking the time to think about your progress, figure out what's working, what's not.
Celebrate those wins.
Exactly. And Clear suggests you have a system for reflection, whether it's weekly, monthly, even annually.
It's like having a regular check-in with yourself.
And now for a really interesting concept, the habits of happiness. That's chapter 26.
Happiness habits. Sign me up.
So Claire says happiness isn't just a feeling, it's a skill you can develop.
You mean we can train ourselves to be happier?
Totally. There are specific habits that can boost your happiness levels.
Like what?
Things like gratitude journaling, spending time in nature, mindfulness, nurturing those close relationships.
Those all sound great. I need to get on that.
It's about focusing on the positive, being present, appreciating the good stuff.
So it's not about waiting for happiness to magically appear. It's about creating it. Now, in chapter 27, Clear reminds us that personal growth is a journey, not a destination.
It never really ends, right? There's always room for improvement.
It's like always being a work in progress, always striving to be better.
And finding the joy in that process.
So we covered a lot of ground here. What are your biggest takeaways from this section of the book?
Honestly, it all comes back to those small, consistent actions. That's what Clear emphasizes again and again.
It's not about those big dramatic changes.
Nope. It's the little things you do every day that really add up over time. It's the 1% better everyday philosophy.
It's about trusting that process, even when it feels slow or you're not seeing the results you want. Just keep going.
Exactly.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're in the final stretch of Atomic Habits now.
Yeah, these last chapters are really powerful. They tie everything together and give you that extra push to actually apply all these ideas.
So where are we picking up?
Well, chapter 28 has this concept called the law of inversion. It's pretty cool.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So it's like this. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to kind of flip it around.
Flip it around? What do you mean?
Instead of asking, how do I succeed? Ask yourself, what would cause me to fail?
Oh, interesting. So you're identifying those roadblocks in advance.
Exactly. Figure out those things that might trip you up and work to avoid them.
I like that. It's a proactive approach.
Yeah.
So are there specific questions we should be asking ourselves?
Yeah, what habits do I need to break? Or what are my biggest temptations? Things like that.
That's helpful, anticipating those challenges and coming up with a game plan.
Right. Now, in chapter 29, Clear goes back to something we've talked about a few times. Reflection and review.
Yeah, that seems to be a big theme throughout the book.
And for good reason. It's essential for growth. It's about taking that time to really assess your progress,
Figure out what's working, what's not, and celebrate those wins along the way. But how do we actually make it a regular practice?
Well, Clear suggests creating a system. Maybe it's a weekly review, a monthly check-in, or even a yearly review like he talked about earlier. The key is to make it a habit.
Yeah, schedule it in your calendar or something.
Exactly. Make it part of your routine. Now, chapter 30 has this metaphor that really stuck with me, the 4 burners theory.
Okay, I'm all ears. 4 burners, huh?
So imagine your life is a stove with 4 burners. Each burner represents a different area. Family, friends, work, health.
I like this already.
Good.
Okay, so what about the burners?
Well, the idea is that you can't have all 4 burners going full blast all the time.
You mean we can't give 100% to every area of our lives all at once?
Right. To really excel in one area, you probably have to turn down the heat on the others.
That's a good point. It's about making choices, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It's about prioritizing and recognizing that, there are trade-offs.
I can definitely relate to that. There's always that feeling of wanting to do it all. But maybe that's not realistic.
Maybe not. But it's about being intentional with your time and energy. And in chapter 31, Clear reminds us that personal growth is a journey, not a destination.
I like that. It's about constantly striving to be better.
Exactly. And then in the very last chapter, he reveals the secret to results that last.
Okay, drum roll, please. What's the secret?
It's simple, really. Fall in love with the process.
That's it. Just fall in love with the process.
It's about finding joy in that daily grind, those small improvements, the whole journey of becoming better.
It's not about the end goal. It's about how you get there.
Exactly. And when you genuinely enjoy the process, you're more likely to stick with it and actually see those long-term results.
That's such a great reminder. So we've reached the end of Atomic Habits. What an amazing deep dive.
It's been awesome, right? So much to think about.
I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for building better habits.
Me too. It's all about those small changes, consistency, building systems, designing your environment, and really understanding yourself.
It's about taking control of those tiny actions and watching them compound into something amazing.
And remembering that it's never too late to start. Every day is a fresh start.
So true. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Atomic Habits. We hope you're feeling inspired to, take action and start building those habits that will transform your life.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.